Welcome. This is Christy, your vWomen's coordinator, and Kristinia, who is also on our women's team and also your connection person.
Yeah, Connect coordinator.
Yeah. So we wanted to just have a conversation today, taking some of the things that Dustin talked about at the end of his sermon on Sunday, where he was talking really some practical ways of figuring out God's vision for your life and how to get that ball rolling. And so I don't know, Kristinia, you've kind of grown up in the church similar to me, where this idea of what is God's will for my life was kind of thrown out at us at several different points growing up and even as an adult, and kind of feels like every phase of life you go through, that question just like hangs over your head.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even as like a young, I think I came to know Jesus at 14, and I think it's always been kind of like this thing, like, oh, what is my God's will for me? But I think it evolves too, like from when you're younger, and like every year almost. What season am I in? So
Yeah, I think, man, when you're younger, I feel like you feel like you're invincible and you could do absolutely anything. And then as you become an adult, I don't know if it's like doubt or reality or maybe a little bit of both, just kind of sets in.
Yeah.
You can almost get this like pessimistic attitude towards yourself and maybe even believe the lie that like I don't have any way to contribute. I don't know what God's will is for my life.
I think that is hard. I think it's hard in today's society where like sometimes we're very we're rushed through things, so we don't have time to like stop and like really like communicate with God or be in that time with him to see like, hey, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
How do you want me to facilitate or to be in my community? And I think that's really hard for people to kind of stop and like ask those questions of ourselves to God.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, today the three things that we're going to try to talk about is really, again, three of the points that Dustin brought up, which was how do we identify God's vision for our lives by identifying our gifts, personalities, virtues, roles, and vocation.
Right.
How do we identify our priorities by looking up in withward and then outward, and then the intentional rhythms and talking about the idea of like regular rhythms and then seasonal rhythms. And so let's just go back to that first point of what is it, maybe this, how much pressure was taken off of you when you can hear like, oh, I can identify God's vision by looking at like how he created me, like my personality and my gifts. And even like, what was it like the first time maybe you identified some of those gifts?
Yeah, I never really like understand like the whole like gifting thing. Like I just knew like who I was. I didn't grow up with any like concept of like there was spiritual gifts. Like I guess until I was much older, until I really became like a 20 something. But I look back and I say, oh yeah, I was very like, for me, I'm always very administrative. Like administration is always high on my spiritual gift score. I'm a 3 in the Enneagram, so very like take charge and just wanting things to be in a certain specific order. And I think, but it is really overwhelming though, I think, when you figure that out. But I think at the same time, in a way, I always knew that those things were very much like who I was. And then some other people probably don't always have that. But I think for me, it was definitely eye-opening to know that, oh, God can use this kind of what I always just assumed was like bossiness. And from like Jesus Sorry, Kristinia, you're being a little too controlling and bossy. But he can use us even in our like darkest way for his kingdom, you know. And I think it's evident, like me being a Connect coordinator, like I really do well with trying to facilitate and get people scheduled and train people and stuff. Like really feeds into what I think God's vision is for me. So yeah, but what about you? Is that like, how did you come to kind of know that for yourself?
Yeah. So yeah, we mentioned like I also grew up in the church. I got saved at a really young age, and so I can remember I think in youth group at some point taking some of those spiritual gifting tests, and I remember I got discernment even at a young age, and I was like, "What is that?" Like I've never heard the word, and that seems so
Very
weird.
churchy.
And, but it's so funny because even when I look back over my life, I see that, like I see that gifting in me. And for me, it's allowed me to experience a type of fellowship with God that like I have this understanding and this awareness of maybe what people are struggling with, or even how to intercede for them. And so in that, it's a very edifying gift, I think, where I'm like, okay, but it's funny because I'm an Enneagram 8. So here's the difference. So Enneagram 8s were the challenger, right? And so I am not afraid of conflict. I actually really like, to me, one of the most intimate things you could do with me is just kind of like have hard conversations, because that means we really love each other. But that's the ironic part about having the gift of discernment, is I'm not always supposed to say something. I'm always supposed to pray, right? And bring it to the Father in prayer. And so it requires this patience on my part to hold back and wait. And I am not good at that. And so learning my spiritual gifts, but also my natural tendencies, it's helped me kind of like walk in the tension of like what my flesh wants to do versus what the spirit wants me to do.
Yeah.
And so in that capacity, like I can see that I can see how it even helps me in being a counselor, right? Like I can discern like what's happening in the counseling room with me, like how far to push, how far not to push. And so it's certainly been helpful in figuring out my calling, so to speak,
Right.
But yeah, I mean, even, I also get that, like, I'm a Christian woman in ministry who can easily be seen as bossy, and I'm like, no, I'm not trying to be bossy. I see it and it needs to get done, and we need to do it. So you do it. Like,
I was thinking is like the church needs more of that. Like, I don't want to say that, but like, I really believe it's like, I believe that like, women weren't just made to just sit in the corner, and we have a gift as women, especially women in our church. And sometimes we don't ask ourselves this question, like identify God's vision for your life. And I know Dustin provided a really great questions to follow up on that. And I think that we're afraid to utilize ourselves. And I think once I kind of gave that up, and there's a way to give feedback and there's a way to lead and talk to people, right? But I think, as women, like we have a really great things to give back to our community, to our church, to our leaders. And they want to hear us. I think they do. I think church pastors today more than ever, I think, want to hear the women, want to hear people of color and minorities, and they want to hear these things because they want to better themselves. And so
yes, amen.
Yeah,
you're gonna take us to church. But no, and it's so funny. I've even when you say that, it makes me think. There have been, like, especially recent months where I know that our pastors and our leadership have been under pressure to try to balance, like, this is what culture is saying, but this is what we know Jesus says as the leader of the body, and how do we navigate the people that we're flock, our flock, and how do we lead them in love and in justice and in truth, and I have been so burdened and impressioned to pray for our leadership in very specific ways. And, I let them know, like, I'll send them all a group text, be like, hey, I'm praying for you today, and these are the ways that I'm praying for you. And it's so funny, the responses I get. It's funny. It's affirming. It's like, oh yeah, I needed that today, and it's just like, we all need each other. And I don't know, just leaning into those gifts helps us do our part as the body, because we all have unique gifts, and we all don't do the same thing. We all don't play the same role or have the same function. And so if we are withholding ourselves from really, I guess, like living out of our personality submitted to Christ, out of our Enneagram number submitted to Christ, personality, submitted to Christ, all of it, then we're keeping back maybe a blessing to the body. And so
absolutely,
when we walk in that and we submit ourselves to Christ and living out of our personality and living out of our roles at work, then we are a blessing to those we are in community with.
Absolutely. And I think that's what the general theme around like creating like a vision or like your identity, because you then will be able to really open yourself up to say, how can I bless others? How can I further God's kingdom? And, in a way, it really helps us to identify like what my path kind of is. And like, granted, that will change over time, right? Even in different seasons. But, I know for me, when I created my vision, like it was like, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense, and it kind of gives me my kind of path. And I like paths.
Yeah.
I really like paths. I like lists sometimes. But I like knowing where I'm going.
Yes. Yeah. And that makes, that's just a perfect segue into the second point, where Dustin talked about you can identify your priorities by looking inward and upward and withward and outward. And so, which I didn't know withward was a word.
Me neither.
Dustin would know. He's so smart.
He is.
But, with this, man, I'm a huge proponent of like, the better we know ourselves, the better we can know and fellowship and understand God and understand his love for us. And so obviously, and maybe it's so important to me because I've seen the impact that it can have on my life. And I've seen, the more that I have looked inward to be able to identify what motivates this action and what struggles am I having in this area, what is even motivating me to pray right now, right? Being able to look inward has certainly impacted all those other aspects, like
absolutely.
My relationship with God, my relationship with others, my relationship even with myself, and my relationship with like the overall mission of my life for God.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that those like 4 segments and like breaking them up into those like 4 quadrants is really key. And it makes it seem, I don't know, simpler, because you're not thinking of, oh, like, how do I plug all these things in? But it really brings it into that inward, outward. So I'm going upward. I'm sorry, I don't remember. I'm looking down at my thing. So but yeah, like I really felt like it really did a great opportunity to put it in those 4 boxes was really easy. Yeah,
I feel like it helps break it down and make it somewhat measurable too. Right? Yeah. Again, like, how do I identify my priorities? And even that question can just seem really overwhelming, or maybe even it can seem a little guilt inducing, and not unintentionally so, but just being able to break it up into those 4 little quadrants of just taking an honest assessment kind of each one of those aspects of your life. And this is where, like, I love journaling, and like, if you don't like it, I think everyone should journal. It's so helpful.
It is. That was one of my things too, like my growth areas that I wanted to achieve was journaling more.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know, I one of the resources throughout this series is Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And Peter
Mm-hmm.
Scazzero talks about this idea that like we all have a shadow self. And the shadow self is that part of us that we wish wasn't there. It's the part that, the way I like to describe it to people is like, if it was plastered in, like on a billboard somewhere, we would be mortified. And so we all have that piece of us. And it's that piece that like God desires that we bring it to the light that he offers, and like break it up and deal with it and repent of it and experience healing and freedom. And I think when we're willing to face that shadow self, so to speak,
Right.
it does have a greater impact on our relationship with God. We don't. It has that greater impact on our relationship with God, where we experience a freedom from shame. Maybe we experience a deeper willingness to like go deeper with community because we're not hiding in secrets, and even maybe a sense of like, I do have purpose, and I'm not held back by my sin or my struggles.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that like when you can identify, like, I think it really, if you can, not everyone's introspective. Some people are just really find it really hard to kind of look at themselves and take a really hard look before God. But I think what Dustin's asking us to do and doing the kind of that like daily rhythms, or even what Peter Scazzero says, and we have to take that inner look. We have to take that self-assessment, because then we can really move on and say, how can I give that to God? And then acknowledge, like, when am I being that like self person instead of being the what I know God wants me to do.
Yes.
And I think that's hard. Like, I'm really introspective and I'm really harsh on myself.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's other women out there who feel that maybe experience that too. And so I know for me that it's acknowledging that self, and the ability to move on from it and to say, I don't have to be that way. I can put things in my life to make sure that I'm not doing that, and that I'm, no. But if we don't acknowledge it, it's just going to continue to be a problem.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I feel like one of the truths that we have to claim over our life when we want to face that part of ourselves, that shadow self, is like we have to remind ourselves that God loves us no more or no less than he loves us right now, and no more or no less than when we were at our worst selves either. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like, ooh, I'm getting chills just thinking about that.
I know, like go ahead.
But like, if we're not cultivating that in our lives, if we are not, like, there's a difference between like if it just stays in head knowledge and it never like travels down to our heart, then we will believe lies from the enemy, and we will believe that like we can't come to God because we're so disgusting or we're so sinful or whatever. And I think that's where the importance of the intentional rhythms comes into play. Right?
Absolutely. Because you're not, if you keep to them, then hopefully you're not sticking into that like self, like deprivation type of, you're not like, oh, I'm just a horrible person, I've done this. In realization that we all are horrible people, we're all sinners. God still loves you, he loves me, and he wants to do great things through you. But like if I didn't have daily rhythms or rules of life, whatever, then I don't think I would be able to come back to center. I always think about that. Like, I really feel like this whole aspect of rhythms of life, rules of life, really bring us back to the center.
Yes.
God.
Yeah.
and I just think that's the most important thing for me, because I need the reminder to be more centered on Christ.
Yeah. But yeah, like I need the gospel changing power daily. Like I need that daily. Yeah.
And we probably think we're, and I think our next kind of thing we're going to talk about is kind of like, how did we feel creating like these rhythms or these like rules of life? And I think that like more than anything, once you put it down, you realize you're doing a lot already. Like you're doing some of these things. Just once you can like still yourself to say, oh yeah, I am spending quality time with the Lord every day, or
Yes.
whatever you're doing from that, daily, weekly, monthly perspective. But
Yeah. Yeah, I was intimidated by the idea
mm-hmm.
of creating, like, slowing down and like digging into like, what do I need daily? What do I need weekly? Seasonally and like yearly. Like, okay, I don't like goals. I know I'm one of those weird people. You probably love goals. I
I
see.
do.
I want to be more like you. I don't like them. I don't know why. And I'm a counselor. Like, I have to create treatment goals. Like, but so the idea of thinking like monthly rhythms and seasonal rhythms was a little overwhelming to me at first. But I think having the vision helps create like mental space to think about, what do I need daily in order to have this vision met? What do I need monthly to have these priorities even
mm-hmm.
like aligned, right?
Right. Yeah, that's really important, because then you will have kind of a roadmap. My vision says I want to live out my faith in all areas of my life: work, relationships, church. And so like that's my my mission and my vision, is to impact and draw people closer to Christ. Well, if that's my vision and mission, then my daily rhythms, just life rhythms, will center around those things. And so it was really hard in the beginning to say like, what, like I'm sitting here like thinking, what is that? And it's really challenging for myself, and talking to other people, it's challenging for them. It's something probably a lot of people have not done before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really believe that like, if you can take the time, it doesn't have to be hours and days, but sit down and really think and answer those questions that Dustin has given us through the resources, and come up with something. It doesn't have to be huge. It could be a few things in each box. And we think that we're supposed to put like so many things in there, because that's our normal like inclination. I don't know if it's you, but for me, it's like, I need to have like 16 things. My husband's like that. Like my husband, Ronnie, he believes in like more is better. So for him, I know he's going to struggle with it when he starts creating this, but yeah, realizing that just take the step to sit down.
Yeah.
God, right? I don't know how you did it, but that's what I did. I took the time to like sit down, take a deep breath, and say, okay, God, like, what do I want to do for you and for me, and so that you can use me. So.
Yeah, and that's so good. And I think something you said made me think like, this doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't even have to be like right, because different, or even consistent per se, as far as like it needs to look the same all year long, because life has ebbs and flows and changes.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's called a rhythm, right? Like,
right.
You can tweak the rhythm and the rule of life however, like when you need to.
Yeah. Like I'm at my parents' house this week, and it's crazy. I'm caring for my mom. My rules of life are not. I am not doing a whole bunch of silence and solitude or Sabbath. But I'm like, but right, everybody has that like that time. But I think it's important that we say, okay, how do we come back to it? How do we, if we're kind of off kilter, right? I know that you probably maybe have experience with that too, but it isn't perfect. I think if you're trying to create perfect, you're going to be frustrated with it.
Yeah, because I think if your goal is perfection, then when you don't meet it, because you're not going to, right? Because it goes back to like, we're all a mess. Like we all got struggles. Life happens. If the goal is perfection, then like you're not going to be motivated to get back up and do it again, or like try to, begin again, because you're going to be discouraged. And I think reminding ourselves that this is called a rhythm for a reason, and it's called, you know, a rule of life for a reason, that this is our goal of
Right.
trying to get these things met. But there's grace there if we don't, and tomorrow's a new day with new mercies. And you know, the
Absolutely.
whole idea of it is just thinking through practically, what, you know, okay, for me, my weeks, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, are just crazy busy with clients and students. And so I don't get home until 5 p.m. And I will tell you, the Hagen's household will be insane. And I have referred to it as a marathon from the time either one of us walk in the door until bedtime for our little girl. It is just insane and chaos. So I know, like, I put on my rule of life, I've got to have a very simple dinner in mind for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we can do something extravagant if we want to.
Right.
But those 3 nights on, like, the front end of the week are going to be like a crock pot meal that's been cooking all day, leftovers from another day, or a frozen pizza. And my family has to be okay with that. I'm okay with that because at least y'all are eating, right? You know, and that has greater impacts all around, because if I'm not cooped up in the kitchen, then I can spend time with my child, or I can spend time with Josh, or you know, I'm not stressfully thinking, oh gosh, we just need to spend money and we're going to go pick up canes, you know. And so it has like a bigger impact than just we're going to sit around the table and eat dinner. Does that make
Right.
sense?
No, yeah, I think that's absolutely. And people think, oh, my rule of life has to be like, you know, you can have more than one, right? But it has to be like, oh, there's something elaborate. Well, it's as simple as like meal planning and making sure that you have a meal on the table so you can spend quality time with your baby and your amazing husband. I know for, I think that's awesome. I want to share mine. Can I share mine?
Absolutely.
Ronnie and I, we sometimes get off on the wrong foot every week. And so very, very recently, we implemented like a kind of a couples check-in. We do like a emotionally, spiritually, you know, couples check-in, and we talk about our week. So we start on Sunday, and we talk about like the highs and lows of the previous week. What are we doing this coming week? And what it does for us, and so this is really important, and this involves my husband. It doesn't always have to involve another person, but more than anything, it really sets us up for like an incredible success in our week, because we both know like what we could do better from the previous week, how we're loving each other well, because we'll say that we'll talk about you know, like, you did this for me this past week, and that's how I received love, and that's how I gave love to you, right? And so that's really like been like an amazing aspect to our marriage, but also to me as like an individual, like a wife, but also like, oh, okay, I can plan better knowing what Ronnie's weekend looks like. And there's some things like, you know, like, I mean, most people who've been married know that like sometimes your spouse doesn't always tell them about those appointments or things, but we get our calendar. Have you ever had those like surprise, I have this, you know, whatever going on? That happens a lot. But at least we can try to mitigate that in our marriage. So that's a really important rule of life that we live by. Like, we try to have a family check-in time, and it really is important, and it sets the tone for our week in our marriage. And so that's kind of like my rule of life right now, living that.
Oh my gosh. But you know, even listening to you talk about that, I can see how like identifying, like knowing yourself, like, you know, that you like to get things done, and
Yeah.
that's a good thing. But taken out of a caring context, it can come across critical or bossy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then knowing, when you look at the second step of looking at like who is part of your community, well, Ronnie is a part of your community. And so like incorporating both of those into your rhythm of life of, I want us to be connected, and I want us
Mm-hmm.
to check in emotionally and see how each other's doing, because the reality is like you both can get so busy that you miss out on each other. And then when the stress hits of, oh my gosh, we got all this stuff going on, we need to get all these tasks done,
Yeah.
instead of being able to connect. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah, it's really made a big difference. And I would think that like, I think that people could really benefit that even if you're single. Like,
Absolutely.
right, if you're in a community with people, like just setting the tone for your week. How are you looking at yourself? Like, I don't know, like looking at your week and looking at your spiritual, your physical health, and your emotional health. I think if more people made those like 3 check-ins in their week, it would be a lot better. People, like just emotionally healthy people. So yeah.
No, I get that. And it's so funny. I told one of the single women in our church this past week, because I saw where she had gone to the park and had this like lovely picnic with her friends. And I texted her, I was like, that makes me miss that part of life, because now entering this phase of life as a wife and a mom, I don't get that same type of fellowship with friends anymore, right? And it's like a trade-off. Like I can sometimes, right? And it's just, that's not an active daily or even weekly routine of my life anymore. Like my rule of life has shifted, but I'm still getting some of those needs met, but in unique ways. And so it's so true. Like no matter what phase of life we find ourselves in, because even phases of life change, right? Like in the drop of a hat, they could change.
Absolutely.
And so it's still having those intentional rhythms and figuring out what parts of your rhythm are helpful and maybe what parts of your rhythm need to change. Like, am I watching too much Netflix and not like
Absolutely. Yes. I look and tell you, like in creating my like little charts, this is my little chart. And so yours might look different, but this is mine. I liked all the boxes on mine. And through creating my rule of life, like I realized like I watch a lot of television. Like, and Ronnie and I weren't talking enough. So like I made it really important to like, one of my daily things is like before I watch television, I have to complete these tasks of like spending time with the Lord. Like I'm also not really a morning person, and therefore devotional doesn't happen in the morning. However, there's but like I do that, like, and people realize like, oh, like I really realized that was really important. And if I wanted to create that personal time with Jesus, then I have to give up Netflix or whatever I'm watching. So,
yeah, and I know we didn't really mention it, but I know like Dustin's last point was basically like, how are you going to make this happen? And I think these tools, right, like realizing our gifts and our personalities and our virtues, and then identifying our priorities, and then incorporating the rhythms, like that's how we carry it out. Like it really is a simple choice. It really is just, I choose to do this today. I choose, for me, like if I'm going to have any kind of quiet time at all during the day, it's probably going to have to be before Nora wakes up or before Josh wakes up. So I like, it's that choice of like, I choose to get out of bed 30 minutes earlier, right? Which is not that much time.
No.
But when you're groggy and when you like when you're tired, that snooze button sure is comfortable, like convenient. I mean,
yeah. I don't know if you've ever, and it just might be a little off topic, but a few years ago we did like an equip night about like our time, and like it was about giving, and it was about like time management, and they had like this like our time study of like what you spend your time on in a day or a week, whatever. And I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but like if you have, like you need to go encourage other people, because I've done it, and it is incredible. It can be really like, oh, like I'm doing all this stuff, like, or it's really eye-opening how much of our time we might be spending on things that aren't a part of what we want them to, like our vision or our mission. And so sometimes you just have to reallocate that. And so I think this time is a great, like the beginning of the year, it's a great time to like reallocate, reevaluate, because sometimes you have to sacrifice. Like it is I love to watch like a specific show on TV, or I really want to, play this game or whatever, if you're a gamer. but how much am I doing that takes away from my other stuff? So I think that like it's the sacrifice too. I think you kind of mentioned that earlier, but just I think if you're not sure how much time you're spending on things, do that time study, because it was really eye-opening.
No, and I think like, man, that's just such a perfect way to just kind of close all of this, is just how are the choices that we're making daily contributing to the vision, right? And like we see Paul, right? We see Paul making huge sacrifices for the vision, for the kingdom. And you know, it's not about making the huge sacrifices, but it's those harder ones that are the daily sacrifices that are so I don't know why they're so hard, but they are. But the sacrifice, no matter big or no matter how small, God honors that. And I believe that he is honored by that as well. And so it's really just up to us to say, I want this to change. I'm going to take this step, and I'm going to try to do it consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. Just take a step. I think God will meet us there.
Yeah. And I mean, you and I would love to be resources for people.
Absolutely.
Like to help, or to even talk to, normalize, validate, like
absolutely.
Anything.
I think any myself or any of our other leaders, you know, Laura, Sarah, Caitlin, Jen, you know, both of us, and I think we all are so willing to talk with anybody who might be like, can I just sit down with you and like go through this with you? Because like that's important too. And if you don't know where to start, reach out to me, reach out to you. I know you and I have both created this rule of life, kind of rhythms of life. And so I'm more than happy to shepherd anybody who wants to share mine too. If somebody wants to look at ours as well. But yeah.
And we'll even tell you, we don't got it perfect.
No, don't judge us, please.
None of us on the team got it perfect. We'll be the first to tell you that. So
and it's simple stuff. Like people don't realize that. Like one of mine is laugh with Ronnie every day.
And I love that.
Like
it's so
yeah. Like you'd be like, oh, that's not very Jesus. No, but that like that's like when you go inward, right? Like that laughing with my spouse or laughing with my friends, do something fun, reading a good book. So I think there's a lot of things that people don't open themselves up to.
Yeah.
And it could be just as simple as that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be some uber spiritual thing. Just something that's like a form of self-care. That is a way that we honor God as well with our bodies and our mind.
Meal prepping, like that makes your life better. Like that's important.
Yes. Save money, eat better, all the things.
Be a good steward of your time and your money.
That's right. Well, Kristinia, I'm so thankful for your time, for this conversation. And I hope that it's an encouragement to the women of our church that this is not some crazy big task that's out of grasp for anybody, but it's very practical, very easy for anybody to do.
Yeah, I would agree. Don't be afraid and just go do it. And I hope that we can have other conversations in the future on different topics and stuff. I think it'll be really fun and have different people. You and I just don't have to talk, but Christy can host other wonderful women in our church and men too, maybe. And so I know that I'm looking forward to future kind of podcasts from the vWomen. And I hope you guys are too. And I know this is new for us, but I'm excited. I'm thankful to be able to share. And I hope that all the women listening and watching are really blessed by that. Just our little topics of just hearing us laugh maybe and talk stupidly. Or hear my phone go off, it's not your brain.
Again, we really, we wanted to incorporate, we are not perfect.
Correct. Like forgetting to turn off my alarm to stop eating. I have an alarm. And it goes off at 7:30. So I was like, oh, course I did not turn that off. So, but that's life.
Okay. Okay.
Well, Christy, thank you so much for hosting this and having me on. And we'll link to some resources for the rhythm of life at the end. And yeah, that's it.
All right.
Cool. Bye.